Overwhelmed with online or just wanting to learn more about how you can build a successful business amidst all of the self-appointed gurus, big buzzwords and empty promises? The Breaking Digital podcast by Doyle Bueller tells you exactly what smart entrepreneurs need to know to escape the clutter, get clear of the confusion, and pass the bullshit of building and growing a successful business online. It's about digital leadership and delivering the best value for your business online to your audience. Now, here's your host and author of the book on digital leadership and online marketing, The Digital Delusion, Doyle Bueller.
All right, hello and welcome to Breaking Digital, the worldwide and only podcast for smart entrepreneurs wanting to become true digital leaders in their industry and to own online. I'm Doyle Bueller, and I'm so excited to be bringing you a special guest today that is shaking things up in the cooking podcast worlds and almost everything else out there. Ronsley Vaz, as he's going to be coming and talking with us very, very soon. So I'm really looking forward to helping you learn more about what you can be doing online and helping you do it better. I want to help you become the true digital leader for your industry. And that is why I created this podcast to help everyone in their entrepreneur journey online. And if you have any comments throughout the program, please feel to connect on Twitter at Doyle Bueller with hashtag #OwnOnline. And you can also find resources that we talk about as well as the podcast for download on thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. All right, let's get started. So I'd like to introduce to you Ronsley Vaz. And Ronsley has been shaking up things, like I mentioned, in the podcast world, but also from a core of food and that sort of thing. And he's one of the chief food sharers at Bon Appetit, a company that unites people over food. And he is the host of, like I mentioned, the Australia's #1 food podcast on iTunes and the author of the upcoming book, Bon Appetit, Uniting Peak Performance Over Food. So welcome, Ronsley. Happy to have you here.
Cheers, dude. Thanks for having me, Doyle.
Yeah, excellent. So tell me a bit about your business and how you're shaking things up with the podcast and the connection to food and everything.
Well, you mentioned that I'm shaking things up. I just feel like I'm just, it's just one day after the other, put one foot in front of the other. I started Bon Appetit a couple of years ago with the intention that I wanted to change the way Australia saw food. And as a result, I think the big reason for me to start looking at Bon Appetit from those lines was I was sitting at a food court at a mall, and I saw these kids finish school and exchange a bunch of coupons for chicken nuggets at a McDonald's and
you mean Macca's?
That's the one, at a Macca's. And the surprising part wasn't that as much as it was that the kids were panting on their way to the table. So they couldn't even make it to the table without panting. And I was like, something needs to be done. I mean, this is, it's unacceptable that these are the influences that they're growing up with. And I was like, how do I make that impact? And I decided that I wanted to effect change with the people that these kids would look up to. So I created Bon Appetit, which was basically cooking for the high performing individuals around us, whether it's athletes, entrepreneurs, creatives. It doesn't matter what they are, as long as they're high performing. They know they got to eat better. And I wanted to get the message to as many people as possible, so I created the podcast. Now, I happened to stumble upon the podcast, but it seemed to have worked out according to plan.
According to plan. But I thought you were sort of trying to put one foot in front of the other.
That's it. I mean, hindsight plan is always 20/20. Yeah.
So in terms of high performance people, like what do you mean by that? Just people who decided that they want to take action with their appetite? Is that kind of what you've discovered?
Not really.
No.
I think high performance is people that they do feel like they love what they do and they do what they love, and they manage to do that for 12, sometimes longer hours a day. And they know that they got to eat right. They know they got to sleep right. They know they got to do all these other things in between, but they find it difficult to make it all happen. So we take away the stress of cooking and whether the food is right for them, and we just cook for them.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so like prepared meals kind of thing for people who are really kind of on the edge and busy then type thing?
Yeah, so consider us to be the Uber for chefs.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
we have chefs that go into people's homes.
I love Uber.
Yeah, I do too. I used them twice today already.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, we go into people's homes and we cook for them on a weekly basis.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, cool. And so then you said you sort of stumbled upon podcasting. Like what was the point where you said, "Hey, wait a sec, I can actually connect with my audience here"?
I was thinking on the lines of, well, these kids, who are their parents and where are they situated? And I realized that a lot of them would be traveling to and from work, and I wanted to talk to them on that commute. And that's when I kind of found out, like, what are the best ways to do that. No one's going to read a blog on the commute. No one's going to be watching a video. Maybe they could be, but is there a better way? If they're driving a car, would they be able to, consume that content? And I came across podcasting, and podcasting just made so much sense because, as you realize, I love talking.
Yeah. And you get to connect with that audience when they're technically not sort of there type thing. Like, it's not like they're sitting in front of a computer, or they may be driving, commuting, that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we connect really well through the auditory sense with someone that we're listening to.
Yeah.
And it's very underestimated what kind of a connection we make.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And you have a very soothing radio voice too.
I don't know, man. I got a face for radio. I don't know about a voice for radio.
A face for radio. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, that's really what sort of the podcast is for. It's to connect with people and sort of share your vision and share your mission. And so it went quite well for you.
It went amazingly well for me. In fact, I think everyone that has a podcast has this massive opportunity to create connections where someone would not necessarily give you the time of day, but if you can invite them to chat with you, that's a whole different story altogether.
Yeah, you're kind of creating a conversation, right? And fundamentally, that's what it's about. It's not just about having a sales pitch or whatever. It's communicating and have a conversation. So
that's it.
Yeah. So, and then you kind of leverage that into like training other people and showing other people, right?
Well, I had a whole bunch of people ask me, they were like, hey, I'd love you to teach me what you like in what did you do and how did you get so much traction? And I went, yeah, right. Okay. Let's see.
Did you
what
know,
I did.
Or you kind of were just going, hey, let's try this.
I reverse engineered everything. So I went back and I created a course that I thought was 7 steps. And what I did, looking back at all my notes, right, on Evernote. So I was like, oh, what does this do? What is this step? And I created the 7-step process. And and off we went. A new business, a new company, which has evolved over time. And now it's basically dealing with all sorts of marketing and advertising in non-traditional ways.
Okay. So what would you say is still your focus, the podcast, or is it still the food and making healthy choices with your food as well, or both? Or
both, definitely both. At this stage, because we're doing the first podcasting conference in the Southern Hemisphere, all my kind of energy is going into that event, and it's about a 70-30 split, so 30 on the food and 70 on Podcast Revolution. So that's where it's at.
All right.
At this stage. And
that's the name of the event is We Are Podcast, or what?
Yeah, it's Podcast Revolution.
Podcast Revolution. Okay.
wearepodcast.com is the website.
Excellent. Okay. And that's actually coming up pretty soon, right? In the next couple of months.
Yeah, it's 3 months away to the day.
Oh, wow. Okay. The countdown's on.
It was on for a while, man.
Oh, okay.
The butterflies have suddenly turned into rats in the tummy. So
okay. And what's the objective of that program, or that is it? It's a workshop. What is it?
It's a conference. The idea is to unite the clans in Australia around podcasting, and how to create a following using the auditory sense, and how to make it sustainable and monetize it. and how to connect with the people that you really should be talking to.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Cool. And how would you suggest that people do connect with their audience, with their podcast, if they want to set one up, or if they're kind of questioning, well, should I do one or should I not do one? Well, what would you recommend?
I think you got to find out why you're doing it. And I was just having a conversation with someone before this, another podcaster from the United States, and we were trying to figure out what really is the key ingredient that make podcasters successful. And we boiled it down to attitude from the very get-go, right? If the attitude of the podcaster is to go out and make money, how can I get a quick result from creating a podcast? It doesn't really work out according to plan. However, if they start on the lines of, well, how can I deliver the most value using a podcast? That creates a whole different set of snowball effect.
Yeah, I mean, value is very, very key, because a lot of us, we kind of miss it, and we're talking features and benefits, and we're expecting people to just connect based on that. But really, it comes down to that value. Do you find that there's a bigger challenge, though, to delivering that value, because it's audio, right? Like, people have to listen to it. They have to kind of concentrate on it, or that value kind of goes out the window. What do you think?
Really.
No?
I think that when people are listening to podcasts in particular, they're doing it on their leisure time. So imagine this. Imagine this, right? You're kind of reading a blog or you're watching a video. You're kind of going in and out of it, right? You're kind of trying to do a whole bunch of other things while you're watching it. And you're trying to really, skim through as much as possible. However, when you're listening to audio, what really happens is you're driving, and the driving becomes your secondary what's the word, focus, because you're listening, right? You're listening, and your driving becomes automatic.
Yeah.
However, when it's the other way around, you don't get your entire attention. There are bits and pieces that you'll miss while you're doing something else, listening to audio. But I think you're there in a space where you're actually looking to soak the information in. So as long as you kind of pay attention to who your audience, your listener is, I think you'll deliver value.
Okay. But what kind of value should that be? Should it be, or does it matter how to do things or what to watch out for? Like are people looking for sort of specific tips, or are they looking for ideas to take in and to engage upon, or what's been your understanding?
Well, it depends on the show. It depends on the type of host. It depends on the type of people that they're talking to. It depends on what exactly the objective of the show is.
Okay.
And there's no one set answer for the best way to provide value. It depends on the type of people that are looking for that value.
Yeah. Well, yeah, true. I mean, absolutely. You have to kind of coincide what you're saying with what people are wanting to hear. So at the end of this, you'll have to give me a podcast rating then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's the Ronsley rating system. Well, a lot of what I teach and I educate people on is sort of what I term digital leadership, which is kind of defining how we sort of produce that value online. And I've obviously seen a lot of what you've done, and really quite impressed with your content management, your strategy, your sales pages, all that kind of stuff. How would you define digital leadership for your business?
First of all, I think digital leadership is a term that can be defined in so many different ways. But I suppose just understanding that your phone is the first, second, third, fourth screen that your audience probably looks at every single day after they wake up and before they go to sleep. And how do you get in front of them is probably a good way to look at where your business is at from a digital leadership standpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's good. So are there things that you can do or recommend to others to say, hey, this helped me sort of define my ecosystem, my digital ecosystem online because I'm sort of taking charge? Are there any specific things you might want to recommend?
Yeah, I think that if someone's already getting traction on a particular platform, question it. Like, question everything, right? Now, if you land up doing Facebook ads as an example directly, like when Facebook first started to pay to play, a lot of us just went up in a big, hoo-ha and said, how dare they? And a lot of us went, I'm not paying to play. But the ones that did were paying a few cents to get clicks. Right now, if you go and directly create an ad and say, I would like to target entrepreneurs in Australia as an example, you'd be paying between $11 and $15 per click.
Yeah.
So it's there are ways around that, absolutely, but it's more how much do you care about your people? And I think leadership or business leadership in general should be defined on how much you really care about the people you're serving.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, very, very thoughtful, Ronsley. Cool. So a lot of stuff has worked for you. What have you noticed that, some of the pitfalls, some of the things that haven't worked well or not at all? Like, would you care to share some of the other side of the story too? Because we know that digital can be challenging and not everything works, right? What has been your experience?
Well, I think, again, my experience is that if I went ahead and got on a platform just because someone else was getting traction on it, just for that reason, I failed miserably because I didn't give it enough thought. So
that might be something to say, like, if you want to do a podcast because everybody else is doing a podcast, kind of rethink that strategy. Is that what you mean?
I will absolutely rethink that strategy. Get as much information as you possibly can to make an informed decision, rather than just say, hey, that guy's getting a lot of traction, I'm going to do a podcast. That's naughty.
That's naughty boy. Okay. Yeah. So do your homework, decide what that value is. If it is a good platform, right, then obviously there's some merit to it. But what you're saying is taking a look at it and making sure that it actually adds value.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on where your people are at. If your people are not listening to podcasts, for God's sake, don't create a podcast. if you can't create if you cannot put together, I don't know, a sentence structure, which I'm struggling with right now, don't create a podcast. Write. If writing is your skill, write. If videoing is your skill, video. If sending email newsletters is what juices you, then do that. If clicking pictures is what really excites you, then be on Instagram.
Yeah.
But if you say, hey, Ronsley, I don't want to get into podcasting because I don't really understand podcasting, I would say you're an idiot because it's not about you. It's about where your people are at. And if you need to figure out podcasting because your people are there, then figure it out.
Yeah. Excellent advice. Because you do have a lot of these maybe not flash in the pan, but something like Periscope, right? That's come up with like incredible strength the last couple of months, and everybody's doing it. And it's like, oh my God, you got to do this and then buy this course and buy that course type thing.
Yes.
And it's like, well, just hang on a sec, right? You really kind of have to define why you're there, and is your audience there? Because they may not be there, or they may not be there yet too. That's the other thing as well, is you're kind of pushed with all these different channels, and a new one comes out and a new one comes out. So we're kind of scrambling as, content producers to say, okay, well, I can see us developing content on this or that sort of thing. So,
that's the thing. When you're producing content, it should not be a chore.
Right.
So if you kind of go, oh, I've got to record that podcast. Don't do it. Like, if you're going to go,
you got to love it.
I've got to do a Periscope. Then don't do it. Like, we noticed, like Glenn, for example, Glenn Carlson from Key Person of Influence, he found his sweet spot with video.
Yeah.
And you can see that he's having a lot of fun doing it. For me, my sweet spot's podcasting. I would have not guessed that. I'm an Indian,
Yeah.
so like an Indian voice on radio, it would either be a comedy show, or someone would think I'm selling them a phone, as an example. But
or asking for
SEO
SEO services.
Yes, or something like that. So it's one of those things. Like you gotta find where your sweet spot is and what you really love doing, and when you find that, create it, love it, love what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Oh, excellent. And so do you record your podcast like from the beach, or do you have a specific studio? Are you looking to kind of relax, sort of what you set up originally?
Yeah, I think, I started off with an idea that I wanted to interview people based on a structure. However, I found out after the first, I think, 7 or 8 episodes that I hated the structure, and the structure just forced me to ask a bunch of questions that was not in flow of the conversation. So I kind of threw all those questions out the window and just chatted with my guests.
Just went with it.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes you have these conversations with people and you wish you had a recorder, because a lot of people would benefit from just listening to the conversation.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that I feel is where I'm at right now.
Okay. All right. So we're going to see some restructuring then, or different. The new Ronsley, is that right?
It's always like, so Bon Appetit now has been I think episode 128.
Oh wow, excellent.
Went out yesterday, I want to say. And Podcast Revolution is probably at episode 10 or 11 or something like that. But since I've come to that realization, everything is now just a normal conversation. And I try to ask my guests questions that no one else has asked them, or ask them questions based on the conversation that I suppose is very different. I want to just take the conversation where it goes and really immerse myself in the conversation, rather than say, hey, no, stop what you're saying, but I really want to ask you this question. And spoil the flow of the interview.
Yeah. So how are we doing so far?
I think we're doing great. I think we're doing fantastic.
Oh, well, speaking of that, I got question number 19 to come. Yeah, I think that's really important. It's sort of being fluid and understanding that, look, what your schedule is not necessarily what your audience schedule is, or your guest schedule is as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Like your guest might be talking about something entirely different, and your conversation might be in that flow. But just because question 5 is next on the list doesn't mean you got to ask that, right?
Yeah, no, true. But I must ask it. Darn it, that's on my list. So who is your favorite podcaster then, besides yourself and besides myself? But we won't even go there.
I think Alec Baldwin does an amazing job with asking questions, and the way he interviews his guests. I think that's going to be the next evolution for me, is to see my guest in front of me when I'm interviewing them. And I think not so that I can record that, but just because I think I can take visual cues from them, which I can't necessarily get from an audio-only version.
Yeah.
I think that's my next evolution.
Oh, okay. So to have like a studio with the guest in the same studio, is that correct? Or just video feed?
Yeah. So either have a studio with the guest in the studio, or if they're overseas or online, have the video on, but not record the video, but just have the video on so you can see the way they're interacting.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I've never actually listened to Alec Baldwin, but he can be a pretty serious and funny guy as well at the same time.
That's right. He has some pretty good accents as well. So here's the thing: is his podcast. He does a great job. Mark Maron does a brilliant job. If you haven't listened to the Obama interview, that was different for Mark Maron, because I felt like he kind of got into the interview before he kind of needed to. I
Yeah.
felt.
Yeah.
But it's the president of the United States, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a lot of pressure. So,
It's got to sound good.
yes, and I think that's what we tend to do when we have a big guest on our show. Is we kind of tend to get into. I got to ask him these questions.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
sometimes just going with the flow is a better conversation to listen to.
Yeah, no, for sure. I had a conversation as well just a few days ago about webinars, which are very, very similar to podcasts, because you're talking, but you're not getting feedback. And actually, it's a little bit worse. And he said, well, what should I do? Because I'm not getting any audience feedback with a webinar. Obviously, a podcast is a little bit different, but still, it's just that sort of audio track. And I said, well, just imagine that you're talking on the radio, right? Nobody really knows who they're talking to, but if you focus it on your audience, then you can do quite well, and also to laugh at your own jokes too, because that way,
at least someone's laughing.
Yeah, exactly. So I try to laugh at my own jokes too. So even if they're out of place. All right, cool. So who is your favorite company then online? I have to ask that question.
Favorite company online? Interesting. Let me think. What do I use the most?
Or I could ask you, what's your favorite color, if that one's a little bit easier?
Probably not.
No?
Maybe black's my favorite color because, I have a whole bunch of black t-shirts.
Oh, okay.
But let's go back to the company. I think Uber is a really amazing business model as well.
Yeah.
I love what they do. In fact, I'm a frequent Uber user.
Yeah.
Purely because it's just so much easier, so much better.
Yeah, it's a great experience. So anyway, I know you don't know this, but just before this call, Uber called me and said, yeah, can you recommend our next CEO? Because the old guy, he's going to vacation in Bali. So they want to hire you. So what's the first thing that you would do with Uber in sort of the digital space, the digital leadership space?
Wow. Okay. The first thing I would do is I would have Uber Radio. I think Uber is already it's obviously, in every car. And it's obviously each driver has a mobile phone or it's given by Uber. And it just makes so much sense to talk to the people in the car.
Yeah.
And have that running, either 24/7 or however you want to look at it. Maybe have a 12-hour shift and that repeats.
That's a brilliant idea, and you heard it here first.
I don't know where that came from, but yeah, I think that would be. So that would also help with the people already in the car.
Yes,
that would help with people who are not in the car.
Yeah,
and that would help align the vision with people that don't understand it.
Yeah. Excellent. You're hired. Here's your bonus.
I'm going to Bali now.
Okay. Well, you have to watch out for the volcanoes. So
yeah.
No, cool. That's excellent. One final thing. What inspires you about online?
Because everyone's on it. Like it's everywhere, and it's gonna and the 0.1% that's not on it yet will be on it.
Why should they come?
I'm surprised if people listening to this are not already online. So I don't think that we got to convert the people that are already listening to this particular podcast. I don't think that they are the ones to highlight the value of being online because they're obviously listening to a podcast. And I think it's only a matter of time. I think it's way past critical mass. It's hit a point where everything that's being developed is being developed as an online version, from books, to CDs, and yeah, I think
it's going to be like the Matrix.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. Excellent. Cool. And just sort of in closing, then you have your Podcast Revolution conference coming up, wearepodcast.com. Why should people come to that? What are they going to learn? What are they going to see?
Well, they're going to see some amazing speakers. We've got some pretty awesome lineup, which we're waiting to get some. Waiting to get them to sign the speaker agreement before we can release and make a fool of ourselves. But some big guests, especially in Australia, big in the podcasting space, big in the online space, and it's all about how to create a following. What you do before you create a following, what do you do when you create the following in terms of the platform from a podcast point of view, and why every single movement that changed human history, doesn't matter what it is, from gender equality to having a phone with one button, we can trace back to a single point where speech changed the way we saw it. And it's really powerful what we can do with the auditory sense. So what we're going to do with Podcast Revolution Down Under 2015 is purely teach people the importance of the auditory sense, how to build a following using that around something that means a lot to them, and then how to make it sustainable through various ways and monetize it.
Oh, excellent. Sounds like an amazing program. And looking forward to sharing those details as well. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ronsley. Really appreciate the time and telling us about your podcast journey. So it's been quite phenomenal.
Cheers. Thanks, Doyle. Thank you for inviting me on your show. I love what you do, and congratulations on that book on eBay.
Okay, yeah,
that's amazing.
It was the first bootleg copy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, fantastic, cool. So thanks, Ronsley. And I want to thank all my listeners to the podcast Breaking Digital, the podcast for smart entrepreneurs wanting to become true digital leaders in their industry and to own online. And once again, I want to really thank my guest, Ronsley Vaz of wearepodcast.com, who's been doing some amazing things online with his business, bondappetit.com. If you have any comments on the program, please feel free to connect on Twitter at Doyle Buehler with the hashtag #OwnOnline, or make it easy on yourself and just Google Doyle Buehler, and I'm always amazed at what sometimes comes up. I'd really appreciate it if you could share this podcast with your network, as I'm sure they will get some value from it for building their successful business online. And don't forget that the resources are available at thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. I'm Doyle Buehler. My mission is to help entrepreneurs to help you become the true digital leader for your industry. And I will see you online.
Thank you for listening to Breaking Digital with Doyle Buehler. While he goes and makes a sandwich, you can find all of the notes, links, and details on this podcast by visiting thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. Go on and click that now. www.thedigitaldelusion.com/podcast. I'll definitely click that. If you'd like a free copy of the book, The Digital Delusion, How to Overcome the Misguidance and Misinformation Online, just send an email to doyle@thedigitaldelusion.com. See you online.